Hello, you look like you could do for another spell. Come and join the Benchwarmers on the bench for episode 5, where we discuss the recent events that have just occurred in round 13. Firstly, I'd like to start off with talking about Dreamtime, which happened at Darwin this year, a land that is heavily populated with Indigenous Australians. Sonny Purdy, what were your thoughts on it being played at Darwin this year instead of the MCG?
I personally loved it. Like the crowd there, you could tell everyone was having a good time. The atmosphere was just crazy. The Indigenous players that were actually playing in the game, you could tell that they loved it. The crowd, the Indigenous people at the game, they were loving it. It was just a good time for everyone, no matter like win, lose or draw. It was a great time, and you could just watching it, it made you feel happy.
Yep, definitely. Anyone else have want to share their thoughts on Josh?
I think overall it was very local. It felt very local, which I think was extremely appropriate. You know, the MCG is quite a formal venue, and as much as a big crowd and a good opportunity to spread the education of Indigenous Australia and embrace the culture, I think it was just fantastic that it was done in Darwin this year.
Definitely. Connor Brown, anything to touch on that?
I think it's always great to have it at the G, which we've experienced in the past, but this just sort of took the feeling of Dreamtime to the next level. It just, as Josh and Sonny were saying, it meant so much more to the players and to the spectators. We saw so many great Indigenous players there present, and their presence just means a lot to the whole round itself, and I think that was really good, and it should be a tradition that, keeps running throughout the years coming.
Definitely. James, mate, do you want to talk about anything
with that? No, I think they pretty much summed it up well.
Pretty much covered it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Yep. So, yeah, no, definitely. It was just awesome, I thought, just to see the smiles on the faces of everyone who turned up in Darwin, because we know not a lot of footy has been played there. And it just felt really real, and it felt really it just made you smile, just seeing everyone there, and the Indigenous players playing from the playing from within, playing with that love. It's what footy's all about, really. Just playing for the people around you, playing for fun, going out there with your mates. And yeah, definitely is something that the AFL should look at doing as in the future. Jeez, I can't talk today. Yeah. Okay. So as we know, the Dreamtime clash was between the Essendon Bombers and the Richmond Tigers. Connor Brown, I know you have a bit to say about this one, seeing as you're an Essendon fan. Go for it, mate.
Oh, I think, look, the stats say that Richmond definitely should have won, but I think in the context of the game itself, it was a game that Essendon definitely also could have won. I think there were some controversial umpire decisions, including some 50-metre penalties and some Richmond dives, I'd like to say. I'm not going to put it lightly, because I do think it was a bit of a dive here and there. And Richmond just seemed to be favoured throughout the night. I thought there was good patches of footy all round. It was a good, good, fast, high-intensity contest, which was always great to see in such a great night for football, the Dreamtime game. And I thought there was great glimpses from debutant Irving Mosquito. And all round, I thought it was a great night. But, of course, I'm a bit bitter because I thought Essendon could have had the win with the controversial Tip and Woody goal overturned, which then saw Richmond to kick the next 2 and put us behind when we could have been up by 2 goals, and then changes the whole game. But anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. I'll hand it over to Josh.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Josh, mate, go for it.
Look, it's been a couple of weeks. We've been talking about Tom Lynch being an absolute flog, but it's unbelievable watching Damien Hardwick stand up for his boys when they're doing everything wrong. They're playing good footy, Obviously inaccuracy probably made it a closer game than it was, but unbelievable how he's standing up for Tom Lynch, despite him just punching players in the face, in the throat, in the ribs, whatever. He's standing up for the Nick Vlaston dive and the Dylan Grimes dive that essentially just ruined a great game of footy. That was really bad viewership. I know all the Richmond fans, I'm getting messages saying, oh, well, you only hate us because you ain't us, which I think is a disgraceful attitude. And every Richmond fan should look at themselves and say, look, yeah, we get a few free kicks, and I understand that that's just how it is. But come on. The umpires and the Richmond Football Club need to look at themselves and go, all right, we need to be accountable for some really bad acts over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, mate, definitely. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and I'm sure Sonny will have one as well to touch on in favour of your view as well. So, Sonny, what did you have to say, mate?
Look, for me, watching the game, it was a pretty good game of football. I do reckon, there was those couple of incidences that happened, but a big one that did happen for me was, and for the second week in a row, was Tom Lynch. And he didn't get reported, suspended for any weeks, and I just don't understand how the tribunal can come to that conclusion when it's repeatedly happened over the year, and especially 2 weeks in a row now. He obviously, went for the throat of Michael Hurley, not open fist, not a push, a full jab at his throat. And I just disagree with the tribunal and what they were thinking.
And here's Wayne Carey coming out saying, oh, well, Michael Hurley was targeting his injured hand, and, defenders do that all the time to forwards. And it's like, well,
I don't agree.
There'd be repercussions if defenders did that because remember Ben Stratton pinching, or was it Orazio Fantasia, I believe?
Yeah.
An absolute disgraceful act. I don't know where Duck's got that, where he's pulled that out of. He's pulled it out the back of his ass. And we're seeing a lot of it over the past few weeks from Tom Lynch, and not a single repercussion for punching a guy in the face. Like, where do you draw the line? These protected Richmond pricks.
Thanks for that, Josh. James, I'm sure you have something to touch on in terms of the Dreamtime clash. What's your take?
It's more so how Josh said that it's that Dimmer came out and said you hate us if you ain't us. And the umpires are sort of favoriting Richmond. I feel like it was sort of shown when Hawthorn were going through their, reign of terror over the competition. They got looked after a little bit more than the rest of the competition. And I just feel that umpires get sucked into teams that, are such high fan based and, get, heaps of supporters to the ground every week. And I just feel that the umpires get sucked in because they try and, favour the majority and keep the majority happy rather than, give them what's right. And I just think that they fall into that little trap. And that's why you see Richmond getting so many free kicks because, that their fan base is so high and they'd rather disappoint the fewer majority.
On the topic of Hawthorn as well, Sean Burgoyne, right? He sling tackles Patrick Dangerfield and gets off, and the AFL comes out and rewrites the rule so that it doesn't matter the damage, you still get suspended. He does it a few weeks later and still doesn't get suspended, and the AFL's really starting to question it. And then Luke Dullhouse does it once to Brad Crouch. Brad Crouch gets up and takes a free kick, much like Patrick Dangerfield does, and yet nothing, So that doesn't go without saying Hawthorn are off the hook too, just because, it goes back to the fan base thing rather than because obviously Hawthorn aren't winning like they used to. But the big fan base thing definitely has a effect.
Yeah, I think I agree. But back to the Lynch point, the AFL isn't doing anything to deter these big players from doing anything because they're just getting away with it too easy, like a fine and then absolutely nothing for punching Michael Hurley in the throat. I mean, he didn't exaggerate it. He didn't flop to the floor to show, look at this. So it's obviously it's a fair dinkum punch, straight to the throat. And I mean, we saw this in their 2017 premiership run, where Trent Cotchin against GWS had a high hit on Dylan Shield, got absolutely nothing, free to play in the grand final. You know, I think the AFL needs to draw a line of this sort of favouritism thing, which I think we're starting to see a clear trend in, with certain teams who do end up also winning games, and they are the teams with the higher fan bases, as Josh was saying. And I think it's a bit ridiculous from, of course, I'm an Essendon supporter, but the thing is, like last week as well, against Sam Collins, punched straight to the gut, and he went down in pain and Tom Lynch just gets away with it. It's just, it needs to be taken out of the game, and the AFL needs to do something to stop these players from actually partaking in these acts.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right in saying that these actions from Tom Lynch in particular definitely do go against the spirit of playing Aussie rules football, and the AFL should take a good look at where everything surrounding that rule stands. On a lighter note, though, how good was it seeing young Irving Mosquito come out on his debut and kick 2 goals? Also, Anthony McDonald tipping Woody kick 2, Daniel Rioli kicking 1, and Shai Bolton winning the Yoken award, which is awarded to the best on ground in the Dreamtime clash. It's just amazing to see the Indigenous boys step up in a round that means so much to them. Sonny Purdy, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I loved Irving Mosquito. He came out straight away with a bang and he lifted up everyone, I reckon, even the Richmond players in that game, because the crowd was just getting involved. Everyone was loving it. It was putting a smile on lots of people's faces, and he was loving it. It was great to see. Was it his debut? It was his debut, yeah? Yeah, just straight away attack the game. Yep. You love to see it.
100%. Connor, I'm sure you'll have something to say about Irving Mosquito. You were loving him on your Snapchat story.
Yeah, mate. I got a bit excited when his name was announced to debut. I've seen him play a couple games in the VFL, and I've absolutely loved his presence in the forward line. He sort of plays a similar game to Tip and Woody, just that pressure forward. But it's just the life he brings in the forward line. And as you saw that second goal, where he just went on about a 45-metre run out of the pack and puts it straight through the middle. It's exciting stuff. And I think not only from an Essendon supporter point of view, but for everyone who likes AFL footy, it's just exciting to watch young players upcoming and like sparking up the big stage like he did.
Yeah, I think it's also good for not just Irving Mosquito on his debut to put on a little performance for people up in Darwin, but also just for all the Aboriginal players across the round. Eddie Beck kicking the goal, Charlie Cameron kicking the goal. I think that for them it's special. It's a special round for them, obviously, but for them to be able to contribute to their team, kick a goal, I think it's just a little bit more special for them, considering the occasion of the round.
Yeah, most definitely. It's so good. It's just, like I said, it's just so good to see this such a great level of diversity and acceptance in being implemented into the AFL. It's really just a whole new fresh breath of air. It's great to see. It's great to watch. We all love it. And hopefully things keep improving from here on in. Josh, did you have anything to say before we move on to the round 14 footy tips?
Yeah, just quickly. Above everything, Irving Mosquito just brings a lot of electricity to the game. A lot of, he's one of those small forwards that you think is just going to provide a lot of magic in the future. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely. It is good to see the young players step up, especially in their first game, and just, just prove what they're capable of. Awesome. I guess that wraps up the topic of Dreamtime and the Essendon versus Richmond clash. Now we move on to the round 14 footy tips. There's a few big games in this one. which I'm sure you boys will love to get into. But let's start off with Hawthorn versus Essendon at Adelaide Oval. Josh Coppin, who do you think, mate?
Not a lot of form from either of these teams, but gut feeling, I'm going for Hawthorn.
Hawthorn, okay. No worries. Connor Brown?
I saw a bit of form from my boys last week, starting to hit their straps, so I'm going to stick with Essendon. I'm not a fake fan this week.
Yes, good. I love it. Awesome. Sonny Purdy, what do you think, mate? Hawthorn or Essendon?
Yeah, I reckon Essendon as well.
Essendon? Okay, thanks, mate. Yep. James?
Okay, mate.
Yeah, I think that's just based off Hawthorn's injuries.
Yeah, thanks. Yep. I think Essendon as well. They're looking pretty good. Metricon Stadium, we've got Richmond versus West Coast, a huge game. Josh Cuppen, who do you think, mate?
Jeremy McGovern has been such a dynamic defender, and his form against the Giants was absolutely superb. So he plays like that again, and Richmond are going to have a lot of problems. So West Coast.
Yep.
There's actually 17 other players on the field once as well for his team.
This guy was like a lone goalkeeper.
Just quietly.
Jeremy McGovern, he got the most intercept marks this season.
All right. Who let Sonny?
Sonny actually, no one actually asked.
Yeah, I don't know who asked Sonny.
Mate, it's your turn in a second, mate. So, Connor Brown, Richmond or West Coast at Metricon Stadium? Who are you taking?
West Coast this week.
West Coast. Okay, Sonny. Now it's your turn, mate.
Thank you. I reckon West Coast. Thank you.
West Coast. Awesome. James?
Yeah, West Coast.
West Coast. I'll go West Coast as well. Now, next, we've got Western Bulldogs versus Geelong. Josh, what do you think? This one's at Metricon.
We played best against oppositions we respect, and I think the way the Bulldogs are going will definitely show some respect to them. So I think we'll get up.
Awesome. Okay. Connor Brown.
I think close game with the Bulldogs in form, but I'm going to stick with Geelong.
Okay, awesome. Sonny Purdy, Western Bulldogs or Geelong? Your doggies are playing big game. Who do you think?
I reckon we're in great form right now, so I reckon hopefully we'll get up. Yep.
Okay. It's a bit optimistic, mate. I'm not going to lie. But James, who do you think, mate?
Geelong too strong for the Bulldogs.
Geelong too strong.
In attacked.
Rhymes. Hey, Josh. Geelong too strong. Geelong too strong.
Mate, what the hell?
All right, I think Geelong as well. Awesome. Big game at Metricon. Adelaide Oval, Port Adelaide versus the Sydney Swans. Josh, go. Port. Sorry, Connor.
Port Adelaide.
Port. Sonny.
Port Adelaide.
James.
Port Adelaide.
Yep, same. Freo versus GWS at Optus Stadium. Fremantle's home game. GWS aren't in the best of form. We know this. Fremantle have had a few close encounters in the last few weeks as well. They're in pretty good form. Josh, who do you think?
Based purely on the fact that they beat Sydney, which the Giants failed to do, I'm going to tip the Dockers.
Okay, awesome. Connor Brown, who do you think?
I'm a bit torn, but I think GWS just.
Okay. Sonny?
For me, GWS didn't play too bad against West Coast, so I reckon they'll get over the line.
Okay. And James, Fremantle or GWS at Optus Stadium, who are you taking?
Fremantle. I'm gonna say Freo. I think
Yep.
yeah.
Thought that one through?
A little bit at home.
Yeah.
GWS aren't traveling that well. So,
Yep. Yeah, Sonny, leave the hosting to me, mate. Fremantle, I think, yeah, definitely. I think Fremantle as well. It is a must-win sort of game for GWS if they want to keep themselves in the finals hunt. But I do think Fremantle are very strong and they're very underestimated in the league. Okay, let's move on next to Melbourne versus St Kilda in Alice Springs. Josh Cuppen.
I got a good feeling about Melbourne this week, so the D's.
Okay. Connor?
Nah, I'm going with the Saints this week.
Painters. Okay. Sonny?
I reckon St Kilda.
St Kilda. James?
St Kilda.
St Kilda.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
the Saints as well.
Just St Kilda.
Yep. No worries, mate. Thanks for saying it 6 times. Weird game at the Gabba. You've got Carlton taking on Collingwood. Must-win game for both teams if they want to keep their finals hopes alive. Josh, take it away.
Judging on Collingwood's last 4 weeks, they'd be one of the worst teams in the competition right now, if I'm being completely honest. And Carlton aren't looking too bad, so Blues.
Love to hear it. Awesome. Connor Brown, who do you think?
I thought Carlton were good against Gold Coast, but I saw some promising signs in the last quarter from Collingwood, so I'm going to go with the Pies.
All right. I'm just letting you know, mate, you've tipped against Carlton in the last 2 weeks and we've actually proved you wrong. So,
Yeah, look, I'm
Connor
not going to
Brown,
change
sorry.
that.
Yeah. It's all right, mate. It's all right. Sonny Purdy, who do you think?
Wait, where's this game again?
It's at the Gabba, mate. It's a weird game at the Gabba.
I reckon Collingwood at the Gabba because it's a weird oval.
Okay. James?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stick with my boys. Collingwood.
Okay. Well, that's very odd from you guys because I'm backing my boys and I'm sure we're capable. I think the Blues will get over the Pies at the Gabba. Last game of the round, we've got Metricon Stadium, Gold Coast Suns versus North Melbourne. Josh, who do you think?
North Melbourne have shown a bit more form than Gold Coast. Gold Coast aren't looking too good at the moment.
Okay. No worries. Connor Brown?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Suns this week.
Awesome. Sonny?
Kanga.
Roo. James?
I'm gonna have to go Gold Coast. Actually, no, I'm gonna go North. But yeah,
North?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll level out the tipping. Sorry, I won't level it out. Sorry.
Five
sorry.
people. There's actually 5
Yeah,
people.
I know. I realised, mate. Obviously not the best in maths. I'll go Gold Coast. Well, that concludes our topics for round 13, so to speak. However, some of the boys managed to get a hold of Justin Madden, who is a former Carlton legend, and they managed to have a few words with him throughout the week. Let's transition over there and take a look at what went down.
His left footer. Oh, Madden is 30 metres in the clear. Wren giving chase.
Ooh.
What a sprint. This is something to watch. Madden goes long for goal. He might have kicked it. Sensational.
Here's Elvin. Into what Madden. Oh, he's too tall, big Justin.
They get their kicks, they're easy kicks.
I think you'll be telling your grandchildren about 6 goals at this stage of the year. Here's Madden anyway.
Well,
Alrighty, hi guys. So we are now here with Justin Madden, who played at both Essendon and Carlton Football Club, 332 games, 2-time premiership player, 2-time best and fairest winner, and 2-time All-Australian player. So he's had a great career down at both Essendon and Carlton, but he's most well known for his career down at Carlton. First made his debut in 1980 and played until 1996. So he goes down in the Carlton Hall of Fame and has, well, you're a very decorated player, and I think you've had a great career, as from my research tells me. So I welcome you, Justin, and we can't wait to get into it.
Thank you very much, Connor. It's great to be here, and it's great to join your podcast today. And thank you for all those nice, flattering comments about my career. It went for a long time. I think I started when I was about 19.
Yes.
And it finished when I was about 36. I finished in the reserves in the end.
Yes.
I went on and played. I finished. I didn't want to finish thinking I had still some more football left in me, so I just played until I couldn't get a game anymore, basically. So that was the
Yes.
idea.
So from the story that I've gathered, you studied at St. Bernard's College in 1980, where you were then picked up by Essendon Football Club. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So I played. I played football at St. Bernard's during the week. We used to have the Wednesday afternoon competitions in what was called the ACC, I think then, was the Australian Catholic Colleges or
Yep,
something
that's what
like
it
that.
is now too, actually.
Yeah, still that.
Yep.
And then on the weekends, I used to play for Airport West in the Eastern District Football League. So you basically play, 2 matches a week.
Yep.
And then I grew up in Airport West, and they used to have football zones then. So they used to recruit players from zones rather than through the draft.
Okay.
And if you lived in a particular zone, you were, you were allocated, or you could be picked up by only a particular club if you lived in that zone.
Yep.
And because Airport West was not far from the Eastern Football Ground in those days, Windy Hill, I was in their recruiting zone and was recruited to Essendon, and that's sort of where I started. They used to have 3 levels of competition in the AFL in those days. So they used to have an under-19 competition, a reserves competition, and the seniors. And so you'd come through the under-19. So I started in the under-19s and played in the reserves until I finally got a game in the seniors about 18 months after I started.
Yeah, so you went and joined your brother Simon at Essendon. What was that like?
Well, it was Simon's 3.5 years older than me, so he'd been playing for a while, and he started playing when he was 16. So he was still he was still at secondary school. In those days, they didn't have a draft limit, so he played his first game when he was 16, and it was fifth form then, but it's year 11.
Yeah.
So he played his first senior AFL game in year 11 at St. Bernard's as 16, but I was 13, 13 and a half or something, or 12 and a half.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And it meant that he'd played a lot of football before I got there. So he probably played about 100 games before I turned up at Essendon. So he was well known.
And then you went on to play 45 games at Essendon, I believe. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but you went off to Carlton on a sort of free contract.
Yeah. So that was the idea. So, so I played 45 games at Essendon. So I was there for about, as I said, I came through the reserves, and I was there for about 5 years. And Simon and I both played in the ruck and both rested in the forward pocket. But I thought we'd both stand a better chance of playing in the ruck more often if I went to Carlton. And
so you discussed this decision with your brother, did you?
Well, I didn't discuss it so much. I flagged it. I worked out my contract was finishing, and he had a contract for a few more years. And I just thought I could. And in those days, it wasn't a full-time job either. Like today, it's professional. So AFL football is professional football these days.
Yeah.
But in those days, it was really only part-time. It was a bit like the VFL, really.
Yeah.
Is today, in that you studied or you pursued a job, and then at the end of the day, you went off and went to training for several hours, and then you did that 3 or 4 times a week and played on the weekends. So you could. And you really had to have a job otherwise, because it wasn't paying that much. But I thought I could get paid a bit more, and I'd get more opportunity if I went to another club. So off I went to Carlton. So that was the idea.
Did you ever actually play against your older brother Simon?
Yeah, we played against each other quite regularly, which was a bit of a challenge because it's not easy playing against your brother, because you can't be particularly mean to them. Whereas if you're playing against a opposition who you don't know that well, it's much easier to be meaner and rougher and tougher, or pretend to be. But against your brother, it's a little bit trickier. But Simon was a very good athlete. He could run and he could jump. I think he was a sprinter and a high jumper at the school athletic carnivals and inter-school athletics carnivals, whereas I couldn't do any of those things. I was a bit extra tall. I was a bit taller. So Simon's about 198 centimetres, and I'm about 206. So that translates from about 6'5" to about 6'10" or 6'9". I'm about 6'10", and I just, had to try and beat him in the ruck, and I knew he would outrun me and try and stop him from getting too many marks. So it was never easy, and he was probably he's the best ruckman going around at the time, and it was always a bit of a challenge.
And so when you sort of came to Carlton, you were sort of juggling both your sporting and academic careers, going to university to train as a teacher at first. So,
that's right, yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I in those, up until almost just before I finished, you really had to do something else other than play football. It wasn't full-time professional. It was sort of semi-professional / professional, but it certainly wasn't full-time. And I think that's probably why I enjoyed it more, because I think if you had to play football full-time these days, it would drive you nuts, because all you'd end up doing is going to meetings and training on the track all the time.
Yeah.
There's only so much physical training you can do, so they make you go to more meetings, I think, if you're a professional footballer. But so I went to Teachers College, at Mercy Teachers College it was called then, in Ascot Vale, and it's now Australian Catholic University. So I learned to be a primary school teacher, and then I went and taught at St. Peter's in Southwest Sunshine for a few years, and then I went off and taught at St. Joseph's Technical College in Abbotsford for a few years. And because you could earn an income from football as well, I thought I'll go back and study, and I studied as an architect, trained as an architect, and worked as an architect after my football career.
And so you first played your first game for Carlton in round 7, 1983, where you, against Sydney, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but you kicked 5 goals in your first game.
Oh, very good, aren't you? Yeah, that was a long time ago. So last time I played football, I think it was serious football. It was close to 25 years ago. 23, 25 years ago, something like that. But I had to come through the reserves. I hadn't. That was sort of about the 4th or 5th game of the season, maybe 6th game of the season. I had to stand out. In those days, you had to get a clearance, they called it, or a transfer, like you do at the local level competitions around the country. So you had to get a clearance from your club to play for another club, and Essendon would not give me one. So I sat out for a few weeks until there was another player, Silvio Fascini, from another club, who was running a sort of a dispute process with his club, so that he could get to, I think it was St Kilda in those days. And then when that was sorted out, Essendon allowed me to go to Carlton, and I played a couple of games in the reserves, and then played my first game in the seniors in Sydney and kicked 5 goals. I don't think I ever did it again after that, but it was a nice way to start.
You were said to be great in front of goal. Where do you reckon this came from? And did you have like a certain routine you went through?
I did have a routine, Sonny. The routine I had was, I wasn't a very good a natural kick when I was playing as a young footballer. So I spent a little bit of time working on my technique. These days, I think if you come to AFL football and you have a particular technique, they don't really want to muck around with it too much. But I didn't have much of a technique, so I learnt one from a few other forwards, a few full forwards who taught me some of their tricks. So mine was a bit more like I suppose if you think of kicking a football, it's very similar to, hitting a golf ball. I'm not much of a golfer, but you've got to keep your head over the ball. So I used to line up the ball with the centre of the goals, and I used to sort of overdo it a bit. If you've got some old footage, it looks a bit silly, really. But I used to line it up a couple of times, lined up with my boot, and then keep my head down, not look up until after I'd kicked the ball. A bit like in golf, when you're supposed to keep your head down until after you've hit the ball and then look up, which I do. And it seemed to work pretty well most of the time. And I sit at home these days as a grumpy old man and look at the footballers who are professional, You still miss goals, particularly at Etihad Stadium where there's no wind and there's no mud, there's no rain. So there's no excuses really to miss. You can't blame anything else but your own boot. So I'm surprised at that because in our day, the grounds were pretty muddy. They weren't that flash. A lot of wind, a lot of rain. So there's good reason to miss a goal. But these days, I don't think I've got any excuses at all.
Was it actually overwhelming debuting at age 19?
Well, it was my first game at Essendon was a funny one because I hadn't been selected in the team. I'd been selected to play in the reserves team, and the reserves were going to play on the Sunday afternoon. And I was living at home, and so was my brother, and he came knocking at my door, and I was sleeping in on a Saturday morning, as you tend to do when you're an adolescent. And he came and knocked on my door about 11:30 in the morning. He said, "Oh, look, I want you to come down to the club for the game today because he might be on the bench in the seniors." And when I got to the ground, our coach in those days, who was Barry Davis, said, "Oh, look, our ruckman, Crackers Keenan, he's got the flu, so we're going to put you straight into the ruck," which was against Richmond, which was a great way to start because I didn't have to lose sleep overnight. I had a great night's sleep and sort of thrown in at the deep end, and I didn't have much time to have to think about it. So it was, in that sense, it wasn't overwhelming, but the biggest crowd I'd ever played in front of. But it was at Windy Hill in Essendon, the Essendon ground. So it wasn't the sort of crowds that you get these days at the MCG or Etihad, but it was a big crowd and a bit of a surprise. And the thing that you learn quickly is once you step up a level, it moves pretty fast and you don't have much time to think. You just got to react. So in that sense, it was probably a little bit frightening.
So sort of going off that, you did say that you were 206 centimetres. So seeing you had that sort of bigger frame, a bit like the King brothers who have played in their second season now, were you sort of feeling okay when you entered the competition because you were one of those bigger bodies yourself?
Well, I wasn't, when I first started, I wasn't naturally big. I was pretty sort of lanky and a bit uncoordinated, and I was still always uncoordinated, but I just got a bit bigger over time. I think when I first started playing, I was about 90 kilos, and by the time I finished playing, I was about 110 kilos. So over the course of my career, I put on about 1.5 kilos every season, and most of that was in definition, really. Not that I was, had lots of muscles anyway, but a lot of that was on the legs and arms and across your shoulders, which you need in the ruck. But I was probably a bit light when I first started, so it wasn't hard to get cleaned up, but I moved slow enough to not be in any collisions.
Yeah. And so after your first season at Carlton, you played 10 games, kicked 18 goals. And then Mike Fitzpatrick retired, which you slid in as the main ruckman, where you then played 22 consecutive games the following year. And then you played in a semi-final against Collingwood. What was it sort of like in that sort of season, getting to playing 10 games to 22 consecutive games?
Yeah, it was a big difference, and particularly when you've got to play in the ruck, in the first ruck for that many games, it's a bit of hard work and pretty tiring. But it was a great way to play. You want to play in the seniors, you want to play as many games as you can. So it was exciting to sort of settle into the squad and into the team, and work on playing senior football on a regular basis. So it was a good feeling. But hard work. You had to train pretty hard to stay there and work pretty hard on game day to make sure you kept your position in the team as well.
Yeah. And so in 1985, you sort of made a big name for yourself in the competition, and you were thought to be what some considered the most effective and consistent big man in the competition. And then you went on to win the BNF for Carlton, and coming so close to a Brownlow medal. What's that sort of like?
Well, it was nice to win the best and fairest. It was, I think that's always a great achievement to win a best and fairest in your club. So that was particularly nice. But to come second in the Brownlow, I hadn't really expected to do that well, and I got more votes than I expected. So I was pretty chuffed, and I only just missed out, but I certainly wasn't disappointed because I thought I'd probably got more votes than I may have deserved.
Yeah.
But it's a nice feeling to have that sort of recognised publicly that you're making your mark, and it makes you feel more confident as a footballer, and sort of gives you the confidence to just keep battling away, and particularly when you're in the ruck and it's not that glamorous sometimes. So it's a nice way to have people recognise that you're actually doing some reasonable hard work.
Yeah.
I've looked at some footage of you over time, and there's videos of you picking players up and throwing them. There's, of course, the Michael Tuck incident, the 86 grand final. Did you ever consider yourself a little bit of an enforcer?
No, never an enforcer, but I was always happy to sort of take it up to other players. I was always of the mind that I couldn't, I shouldn't look like I was being, that someone was intimidating me, and I didn't particularly want to be intimidated by anybody else. Particularly if you're 6'10", you don't want some to look like you're squibbing it a bit. And it's not hard to be criticised if you sort of take a backward step to be criticised for a big man who squibs it. So I had to make sure I didn't look it, even if I was. But I never was that coordinated either. So there are a lot of those incidents that you've seen maybe in video clips or somewhere where I'm getting in the way or falling on people or picking people up or dragging people along the ground or squirting water at people was as much to entertain myself, I think, as it was to entertain the rest of the team. I was always, for some reason, I seem to have done more silly type things on the football field in a sort of an entertaining way than probably some of my contemporaries at the time.
Yeah.
Not much of that goes on these days either, mind you. So everyone's particularly
exactly.
professional and serious. So in those days, people thought I was a bit of a character. It wasn't because I was trying to be. It was just probably more the way I am rather than what I was attempting to do.
Yeah.
You made the All-Australian team at age 34, which is really impressive. What were your 3 most enjoyable parts of playing in the AFL or VFL?
Well, look, I think one of the the things you enjoy most is the camaraderie. Playing in an elite team and the camaraderie of playing alongside other committed professionals is a great thing. It's nice to win a club best and fairest, but probably the most important one is to win a premiership. And I was fortunate enough to play in 2 premiership teams, so 87 and 95. And in that 95 premiership, I was getting a bit long in the tooth, and I was sort of not sure I would get to play every game that season. I sort of half expected that I'd battle through the season because I was a bit older and a bit sore. And then we not only did I play every game in the season, we played in 3 finals or something, or 2 or 3 finals, and won the grand final. So that was, a really pleasant surprise towards the end of my career to achieve a grand final when really I was just trying to get through the season.
In 1986, you played your first grand final against Hawthorn, and that was a tough loss. But from my sources, I hear that you say all of life's setbacks and disappointments were character building, and you come back in 1987 to beat Hawthorn by 33 points. What was the mentality of the team and you yourself to go back out in 1987 and kind of get revenge on the Hawks?
Yeah, well, we'd had we'd lost quite a few games to Hawthorn through the course of those years in the lead up to that. Not every game, but we'd lost a number, and we knew they were probably the best team in the competition. And they really trounced us in 1986. We probably walked off the field a bit embarrassed, really, because it wasn't as if we'd lost a grand final and we got really belted. So there was this sort of real desperation across the course of the year to make up for it. And some of the commentators often say that you've got to lose a grand final to really want to win one, and we were of that frame of mind. We were so desperate to win it because we really felt not only that we should have given it a good shake the year before, but we'd lost in such a a disappointing and almost embarrassing way that we had to make sure that in the 1987 grand final we really put up a good fight, and fortunately we did. And we were also fortunate, I think, that Hawthorn had a difficult run through the final series. That had a few really tough games, and they were pretty tired, and we knew that. So we knew if we really gave it a good shake, then there was every chance we'd come home with a Premiership Cup, which we did, which was good.
Was there ever a player you played with, or maybe even played against, that sort of inspired you or made you, or you just were really happy to play with over your career?
Oh, look, there are a lot of players like that. A lot of on-ballers. So I did the ball out of the ruck to some players, and they had to do something with it. So there were players like Craig Bradley and Greg Williams. Those sorts of players were always fantastic players to play alongside, because if I might be able to hit the ball, but they had to turn it into something, and most often they did. So they certainly made me look like a much better player, because they could turn a bit of ruck work into some fantastic play, and then I'd get some of the credit for it as well. So they were always great players. Stephen Kernahan was the captain for many years at Carlton. He was always a brilliant centre forward and always very reliable. So they were big names and great players. And then very early in my career at Carlton, I played alongside Bruce Doull for a year or two, and he was a very stoic backman and very shy, hardly said a word. So he's a great player. And if you get to see any video highlights of Bruce Doull, they're worth watching, because he had this long hair and it was balding, but he had a headband. So he looked very different to the footballers you see today.
Yeah.
But he was a great player, and I really enjoyed playing alongside him as well.
And so towards the back end of your career, you were sort of talked into another year in 1996. And as you had young upcoming Mark Porter coming through as the Carlton ruckman. And at the moment, we see some players that may go on longer than they should, and their last seasons aren't particularly great. How do you think your career finished up at Carlton, and sort of as they asked you to play on for another year or two, and then in the reserves in 1997?
Yeah. Well, I'd seen. I wasn't a player with a lot of running speed, so my game didn't rely on how fast I could cover the ground necessarily. My game was based on height and strength predominantly, particularly in the ruck. And so as you get older, you tend to lose a bit of speed. But pretty hard for me to get much slower if you'd watch me playing footy. I was slow and tall, and I wasn't getting any shorter, and almost impossible for me to get any slower.
Yeah.
So I thought I could just keep plodding away until there was nothing left in the tank. I'd seen Greg Williams and Stephen Kernahan, who were a little bit younger than me, retire a couple of years before I did. And I sort of half suspect they retired on top, but I half suspected that if you retire on top in AFL football, you tend to almost wonder whether you could have played another season or another grand final or another. You're left wondering.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, I didn't really want to be left wondering. I wanted to make sure I had nothing left in the tank when I finished.
Yeah.
So I played in 86, and I turned up in 96, sorry. Played in 96 and turned up in 97 as well, but didn't play any games in the seniors and retired in the middle of the season. But I was happy to do that, because I knew when I finished, I knew I had nothing more to give in terms of on the field. I could hardly move, really. I was moving pretty slow, but I could hardly move at all. But I felt good about it, and I never played football again after that. There's a lot of fellas retire a little bit early, so they've got a bit left in the tank and go and play another competition.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to play AFL football and finish my career there, and that's where I did. I think I played my last game against Richmond at Punt Road in the reserves, and that did me. And I knew I didn't have anything left to give, and I was happy to leave it as it was.
Yeah, very good.
So you were a minister in the Vic government, and one of your main roles was to organise the 2006 Commonwealth Games. You know, you had to get sports people from all these different countries to our hometown, Melbourne. So what was that like?
Yeah, that was. I went into politics on very short notice, and I didn't have ambitions to, but that's where I ended up. And it's a longer story, but we don't have time today to enter into that one. But I was the sports minister. I became the sports minister, and as part of the responsibility for being, or on top of being the minister for sport, I became the minister for the Melbourne 2006 Commonwealth Games. So my responsibility was to oversee the delivery of the games, and it was a great project to work on. It was really exciting. It was a great event for Melbourne. It went pretty well, I think. People were pretty happy. Everyone had a great time. Lots of people turned up, and the sport was really good. And it really reflected the way I see sport is, sport is a great way of bringing lots of people together of different persuasions, different backgrounds, different viewpoints, and different abilities. And it was just a great chance to have that big event here in Melbourne. And, it was one of the great privileges of my life to be involved in that and work with so many wonderful people who were either employed in delivering it or volunteered in delivering it. We had huge numbers of volunteers involved, and it was just a great time to be in Melbourne, and something I'm very proud of, but I enjoyed very much. And when you're in government, you often get a portfolio that just continues to run on, whereas this was sort of a project in its own right. It had a start date and a finish date, and it was just one of those lovely things to be involved with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've discussed an incredible career here. Just a little note from my dad here, Justin, that you don't owe him a coffee anymore. So thanks for helping us out.
My pleasure. I think I still do owe him a shout of coffee, but thank you very much. Hopefully this goes well. And good luck to you three guys and all your other friends this year. And all the best with this and whatever else you do post COVID and post Year 12. I'm sure you'll have a great friendships to
definitely
to maintain as well.
Yes.
So thanks for having me today.
Oh, thanks for giving up your time to speak to us. Really appreciate it.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, he's kicked 7 now anyway, Pete.
He's hooked it. Madden. And big Justin Madden has marked.
Blackwell coming in toward the centre. He's playing the ground properly, coming in toward the big fella Madden. Now Madden's taken the mark, looking for a hand pass. He wants to play on. Little Bew's doing the tackling. Madden does get a hand pass now to Bradley.
Back.
Kenny Hunter looking for somewhere to go.
Cleve's hurt. As you said, you picked it. He's hurt and going off. That's a bad loss to Geelong.
I think he might have broken ribs. Here goes Madden. Madden takes the mark about 35 metres out from goal. Big Justin Madden. Floating kick, wobbly old punt, but it's right. It's got there. So Justin Madden kicks his first goal.
Picks it up. He goes for the long kick towards the forward line, and Justin Madden.
Up he gets the big fella, too tall.
He just stood there like a big bean pile.
He just stood there, put the arms up and took the mark, and I don't know whether he can make the distance or not. He's out at centre half forward. Looks like he has. He's potted through. Another goal to Carlton. Carlton 17 goals 12. Madden kicks his second goal. Let's see what he does. Oh, not a kick from the man on the mark. Oh, Madden all by himself. No one to compete with him. And he takes the easy mark. Gives it out to Alvin.
Scratch a kneel.
Scratch a kneel with the ball. Goes right out. Big Madden again by the look of it.
Jarrett, Reynolds and Madden. And Madden once again smiles as he said, look at the scoreboard.
Picks it up. Shrugs one tackle. Gets around another. And another. Oh!
No doubt about that. Oh, there he is again. The star of the match. Justin Madden playing the game of his life.
Looks for the spot in front of the goal square. Harry Madden.
Look at his 3-goal kick preparation.
Socks up.
Rub his ears.
Hoists the ball at the goals. Head over. Bends the back. And puts it through and gives a kiss to the crowd.
control. Certainly improved a lot, hasn't he, this year?
Certainly has.
As you said, you wouldn't have given 2 bob for him last year, but he'll pull well on the Brownlow. I don't think he'll win it, but he'll certainly be well up there. It's a goal.
Half pass to go on the ground. Well spoiled by Kernahan. Melbourne across to Madden. A snap by Harry Madden. Look at that.
Looking for Kernahan initially. Williams at the back. Trying to split. Oh, here's Madden. Justin is going to goal. It's all over for the Cats, and the celebration's about to start for Carlton.